Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Caucus podcast. Welcome aboard. Delighted to have you joining us today. And man, we've got a lot to discuss. A lot of issues happening around the country. And of course, right at the centerpiece of it all is what's going on in the election and the lawsuits and just across the country as a whole. Everyone is focused on that. And well, they should be. This is an absolutely critical time in our country. And I'm absolutely delighted to have joining us today Dana Loesch. You know her. She is the number one nationally syndicated female radio talk show host in America. Her show, the Dana Show, coming out of Dallas, Texas, just absolutely phenomenal. You see her on Fox News and every other network on a regular basis. Dana is a Christian. She is a wife. She's a mother. She's a dog lover. She is a hero in America. And Dana, we welcome you aboard. Glad to have you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for having me. Appreciate the work you do.
Well, listen, let's jump into this. The election obviously has everyone's attention right now, and I think it's kind of taken a lot of people by surprise. At the same time, it's shaking our country right now with anticipation as to where this is going, what's going to happen. 73 million people believe the president won, and at least that many. And there are many who are absolutely convinced that we've had fraud in this election. As you're looking at it all, kind of what's your take as to what's happened?
Yeah, it is unprecedented. I absolutely believe that fraud occurred and took place. There are too many receipts, as they would say. I mean, there's just too much evidence of it. And I think the wrong questions, those when questions are asked, are being asked by the fourth estate. It's not an issue of if there was widespread voter fraud. I think the question is, well, how widespread was it? And is it enough to impact the election and actually determine a different winner from one than the people selected? And for all of the people on the left that say, oh, this is just sore losers. This is just sore loser talk, either from the administration or from Republicans. I just think that Democrats were so persuasive these past 4 years, Congressman, telling us that there was all this fraud, that I have just been prevailed upon to believe them. I just think that they finally convinced me. But really, I mean, and seriously, though, these are individuals, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden himself, even after the 2016 election, they had said that Trump was illegitimate. And just even leading up to this election, they were saying he was just straight up stealing mailboxes right off the street and loading them on the back of a flatbed, when they were actually replacing them with new mailboxes. But that correction didn't get the traction that the false claim did in the press. So it's a sad situation because people are tired. This has been one of the worst years, in at least in my generation's lifetime, and a lot of others, a really bad year for everyone. We've never experienced anything like this, and we're trying to get through it. And then on top of it, we are not able to fully put our confidence in institutions that we pay with our tax dollars to help us run our elections, and walk away after November knowing who is going to be in the White House for the next 4 years. And that shouldn't be. This is not a third world country. We're the United States of America. We are the valedictorian in everything, and we should be that in elections too. And so I know people are frustrated. I am as well. I would love a full audit, not just a recount, but an actual audit of votes in these counties where all of these irregularities have been discovered. And I would imagine that anyone who cares about free and fair elections and the integrity of our election process, that they would be devoted to this too. And especially the Biden campaign and Democrats, if they would love to have that talking point of saying, well, he won fair and square. I'm fine with whatever the outcome is, but I want to know that the outcome came that way organically.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And that really is the issue with this. And it's amazing to me, so many of the very exact same Democrats who have refused for 4 years to accept the fact that Donald Trump won, and they have tried every single day to destroy him and to prevent him from being president, are now saying to us, let it go. It's over. Biden won fair and square. Y'all just need to be quiet and move on. It's all over. The hypocrisy has just been unbelievable. And we're just 2 weeks removed from the election, and not only the allegations, but the reality of irregularities, anomalies, the potential for voter fraud that has been out there is enormous, to the extent the voice of the people through the election ballot box has been greatly threatened, if not just outrightly diminished in this election. How do we go from here to not only deal with the current election, which thankfully we have the legal battle that's going, fully justified to do so, but in terms of making sure our elections are going to be sure and safe, fair and accurate in the future as we go on from this point?
I think that's the $1 million question. And the first thing that we have to do is the issue of mail-in ballots. I know that each state, and I would support this to the hilt because this is how our founders envisioned it. Each state has the right to determine how they're going to run their elections. It's not run nationally. However, I think that some states need to get on board. I mean, Texas is a pretty big state. It's the only state that I know where you can drive 13 hours and still be in Texas. And if we can figure this out with all of our people and get everything counted and get everything turned in, and by election night, you know who's going to be walking away with the electoral vote in Texas, then any state, especially that with a smaller population, it should be able to do this. There's no excuse for it. But that being said, the mail-in ballots, this really bothers me because I feel like we're given so many opportunities to cast our vote. You have absentee ballots for those who have legitimate reasons as to why they can't be in the area to cast a vote legally during the election process. They give exemptions for that. My son, who's away at college, he voted absentee. Texas had a website where we could track everything. I followed that child's vote from the moment he sent it back in. I followed that vote all the way until it was counted because I wanted to make sure no funny business was happening. Every state should be able to have that service for their constituents. And the mail-in ballots is a problem because there are stories of people doing the curbside drop-off. You have envelopes with no postmarks. You have signatures that no signature matching. These are things that we use to verify that this vote was cast during the legal election period, and that no one is being disenfranchised. No one's stealing your identity and trying to take your voice and your vote away from you. And I think there's two things really ultimately that need to happen. The mail-in ballot thing has got to stop. And I know Democrats have been litigating that state by state by state, trying to make that a reality. We need to push back on that. And it can't just be elected Republicans. Every constituent needs to step up because you can't just think that your job is done after you cast your vote and then you can go home and warm your hands by the fire of another patriot's work. That's not how this works at all. That needs to happen. The second thing is I think it would go a long way, especially if Joe Biden says that he wants unity. He needs to walk up there, give another press conference, not call a lid at 9 a.m. and say, I want a full audit of the vote so that we can calm the tone of the nation and we can put everyone's concerns at ease. If they wanted to do something like that, that might go a long way with people. But heck, right now, the way it is, they don't even want to pause the certification process. They don't even want to recount in areas where they're finding, and I love the Peach State. I love your state congressman, but oh my goodness, how are we finding 2,600 votes all of a sudden? Is just Santa leaving bags of ballots early? I mean, one of them was on a USB stick. How are we finding these like 2 weeks after election? These sorts of examples make reasonable people suspicious. These sorts of examples put that seed of doubt in the heart of reasonable, good people who want to believe the best of those who represent them, but they're not seeing a lot of examples in the press. And so I think those two ways would go a long way into helping us get past this.
Well, I do too. And listen, I want to thank, by the way, one of your own congressmen from Texas, Chip Roy. He's been here in Georgia trying to help us out and being involved in all of this too. You know, one of the things we have in Georgia with our absentee ballots, those are the only ballots in Georgia that have no voter ID associated with them. And that in itself has been a disaster in this election. But if we can, let's move on, Dana. You know, you have been a part of some of the Stop the Steal rallies. I've been a part of them in Atlanta. You've been a part of those rallies in Dallas. There's a huge one here in Washington, D.C. With enormous turnout for the president. And those are good. I mean, that helps keep people unified in standing up for not only the president, but our country during this time. And yet, what I experienced, at least in the Stop the Steal rally I attended, was a total different environment from some of the rallies we saw over the summer with Antifa and the so-called peaceful protest rallies. What did you experience with the one that you attended in Dallas?
Well, and that was it was a great event, and there were a lot of people who came out to that event. Everyone was singing "God Bless America," and there were some people who chose to wear masks, and other people who chose not to, as is their right. And it was a good time, I think, for everybody to be out and kind of fellowship. And it was not a super spreader event. It was a mostly peaceful protest, and it was good because I feel as though there's so much about this year that mimics the spirit of the Tea Party back in 2008, except everybody's been told they got to stay home. Everybody's been told they have to stay home. And then their only other outlet to express themselves has been social media. Well, then look what's happening on social media platforms.
Right.
I mean, I've had my account suspended because I shared a story about how tech was handling the New York Post story, and I still got my account suspended. And I didn't even share the New York Post story. I was talking about tech, and it was a story I wrote. When people are being stymied from sharing their opinions on social media platforms, and we've just gone through this really rough year, people cannot be surprised that many individuals would show up either in DC or in Dallas or in other cities across the country to be heard, because they are not being heard anywhere else, and purposefully so. It was nobody burned any buildings. No, we didn't punch people. There was no rioting. Nobody brought bricks. We didn't go through a Foot Locker or anything like that. It was a great time and a great event, and it helped raise awareness and keep the momentum up as well.
Well, that's awesome, and that's very similar to what I experienced. In fact, whatever conflicts there were, it was from protesters on the other side who were engaging in vile kind of ways, attacking the peaceful protesters. But also in all of this, and the protesting and all that's really just flows into this, and the attacks from the big tech, what they are doing, silencing. It appears very clear to me that this election showed nationally the American people rejecting the radical socialist Marxist type agenda of the left. We did not have one single Republican incumbent in the entire nation that lost a vote in this. We had really a red wave when we were told it was going to be a blue wave. We didn't lose the Senate when we said that was going to happen. In fact, the president himself receives 9 million more votes than he did 4 years ago. I mean, this was a phenomenal outpouring, really nationally. And you see now inside the Democratic Party, really a coup attempt to try to take away authority from Speaker Pelosi. And who knows what's going to happen with all of that. But they are fragmented, and they're fighting like crazy right now. Where do you see the Democratic Party going in relationship to the American people? Or I guess, first of all, do you interpret it the same way I do, that this was a backlash, a rejection of the American people of this radical agenda that they have? And if so, where do you see the Democratic Party going over the next 2, 4, 6 years?
Yeah, I do. I do agree with you on that. And I think you hit upon something really interesting when you talk about the fragmentation of the Democrat Party, because all the media seems to focus on the right are the Republicans who support Trump and those who don't. And they try to make a big deal out of the tiny percentage of outliers who don't and act as though that's somehow representative of half of the right, which it's not. Whereas on the left, you have bigger concerns because you have maybe one moderate who's still in the Senate, Joe Manchin. After 2010, they ran all of the so-called blue dogs out. And then you have the AOCs and the Ayanna Presleys and the Eleanor Mars who've added. They actually added 2 people to their squad. So they're still expanding. Not only did Democrats actually shrink in power really in the House, they also shrank in influence as it relates to the Nancy Pelosi and the sort of the old guard of Democrats who I don't think are moderate. They're just on a different timeline. They want socialism. They just want to get to it slower so as to not scare people. Whereas the revolutionaries and radicals of the squad, they don't care about optics or timeline. And so the other big thing that I've noticed, and I was looking at a really great breakdown that was published in a couple of different areas on this. I was actually looking to see if I had the link down, was there is a redefinition now. It's been redefined as to who the base is for the Democrat Party and really who the base is for the Republican Party. And I think that this is the biggest, most underreported story of the election, because the Republican Party had more minority voters and more of a diverse voting bloc than they've had since 1960. Whereas Democrats, their base is now predominantly older and whiter. And they're losing youth. They still have more young people, but they're hemorrhaging young people because young people are going towards the big tent that the Republican Party has created, and that's significant. We've talked about building a big tent for as long as I could remember even being able to vote. And we actually finally accomplished it because, as Reagan said, my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy, and everyone's realizing it and getting on the same page. So more Hispanic voters, more Black voters, more women turning out to vote for not just the administration, but Republicans in their respective states. Younger voters are getting out because, and I told everyone, you're turning off by everybody supporting the lockdown stuff. You're turning a lot of young kids into Republicans, conservatives, and libertarians by putting sand in their skate park in Venice Beach, California, or telling them that they can't go and play sports. You're really showing kids what statism is, and you're driving them. We're not having to do nothing. You are driving them to vote Republican. And so we're going to start seeing and the effects of that in future elections, but we're starting to see some of it now. Notice how so few outlets have reported on this, because that is the big epitaph for this election, is how much the Democrats have hemorrhaged and how they've lost the narrative.
Dana, I think that is an excellent point, and no question, largely going ignored from the media. I look at what's happened in our own party here. We've got over 40 new Republicans, and I can tell you, a ton of them are part of the Freedom Caucus. So that tells you not only are people turning to the Republican Party, but to the conservative side of the Republican Party. We have more women Republicans now than we've ever had, African Americans, Asians. I mean, across the board, what you just said is spot on. So with that, do you see that progressing as we go on from here to 2022 and beyond, that the Republican tent, the conservative tent, the constitutional tent, however you want to describe this, patriotic tent, is broadening and that more people are coming under it? You see the Republican Party, the future being bright?
I think it has every potential to be, and I think that the Republican Party absolutely can maintain that momentum and maintain that trajectory, but it also depends on what fights are picked in the next couple of years, and it also depends on whether or not that focus changes and what sort of policies the party pushes. If we go back to some of and no offense to Bush or any other Republican, but if we go back to that era of too big to fail and big government is the response to problems created by big government, we won't keep that momentum. We'll end up losing that. And that's the reason that really the Tea Party began before the 2008 election, because I was out there. I was out there with them, and we loved seeing this explosion of limited government conservatives that were forming within the Republican Party and creating the House Freedom Caucus. And so more of that is what attracts people, that conserve individual liberty, conserve your sovereignty, limit government reach. People are seeing it, especially with this pandemic. That's an attractive message. And if Republicans stay on that note and keep that going forward, they're going to dominate. I mean, 2022, 2024, I don't see how Democrats would have a chance at that point, because they are their own worst enemy, but Republicans can be too. So it's just if they can stay on that path.
Wow, no doubt about that. We've been there, done that. We've seen it, and we've suffered the consequences for Republicans making all sorts of promises to the American people and then not fulfilling those promises when they get here. And the American people rejected us for doing so. And it's really out of that the Freedom Caucus has taken such an incredible role in the country, and people have expressed. I mean, I tell you, every one of us who are members of the Freedom Caucus, where we go all throughout the country, different places, people just say, thank you for standing, for doing what you said you would do. And the American people deserve people who are going to represent them, who actually stand in that. I take your words very personally and profoundly accurate that is absolutely essential. Let me finish and put the last question out here on this whole aspect of guns. You are a huge supporter. In fact, I have a book out on the Second Amendment, and we all love and appreciate your stance for that. You look at all the violent protests that have been taking place, all these types of things, and at the same time, the attitude of the American people towards tighter gun restrictions continues to go down and down and down, lower now than it's been, I think, since 2016. People want to be able to defend themselves. They're beginning to understand more clearly really what the Second Amendment is all about, what it represents, and people are standing up for it. Gun sales are through the roof all throughout the country. What do you make of all of this?
Boy, I remember looking at a poll that came out, I think earlier this week, that was discussing voters' attitudes towards if Biden is confirmed president-elect and if he goes forward and is inaugurated and begins his cabinet and gets policies in, what are their concerns? What top policies would they like to see? And gun control was at the bottom of the list. I think it was like less than 29%, which was like a massive drop from what it was even, just a couple of years ago. But when you have lawless, violent rioters out in the street assaulting people and burning down buildings, and Democrats telling everyone that they want to defund the police while also simultaneously disarming everyone, yeah, that'll do it for gun sales. Absolutely. That's why it's so dang difficult to find ammo right now, and why it's difficult. In fact, there's a wait list for certain types of firearms. But I also think that people are realizing the importance of being their own first responder and making sure that they can defend themselves, because they see these videos. I mean, these images have been broadcast into their homes. They see it in their own towns. They know people who are some of these business owners, and that has a profound impact on people. I think, what was it, the first 6 months of this year, I think it was the ATF was, and a number of gun stores, I think that they were surmising that around something like 5 million individuals that have been making first-time purchases, or these people are 5 million first-time gun owners, and gun owners are voters. I mean, if you're going to go out and you're going to go through the process of buying a gun and filling out that 4473 and taking the training and getting your concealed carry license, you're going to make sure that you're there to put it in the ballot box on the day of, or early voting right before, and you're not going to miss that. So that's a significant opportunity for Republicans as well, especially as we talk about everything that's happening in the Senate with Georgia and how gun rights are going to go however those races go. But that and also minority firearm ownership and concealed carry licensing, female firearm ownership and concealed carry licensing. The demographics across the board have seen such a massive increase. And I think that was one of the biggest fears for gun control groups, was that the ubiquitous appeal, this appeal of the Second Amendment and the accessibility of the Second Amendment to all. And that's the way it should be.
Well, Dana, I cannot thank you enough for taking time to join us today on the Freedom Caucus podcast. You are a hero to so many in America. We love you here and all across the country. People do. How can people stay in touch with you?
DanaLoesch.com. That's the way to do it. Everything that they need to know is right up there.
Dana, thank you so much. And thank you, each one, for joining us today on the Freedom Caucus podcast. We encourage you to follow us as well on Facebook and Twitter at Freedom Caucus. Until next time, have a fantastic remainder of your day. We look forward to seeing you again on the next podcast of the Freedom Caucus.